The road promised you freedom. But for truckers, freedom is just another word for complete isolation. In this journey, 4 true horror stories where sleep deprivation isn't the danger. It's the invitation. Will you face what runs next to your rig at 70 mph? Brace yourself. Because when the lights go down, what you see in the rearview mirror is real. This is 4 true horror stories of truck drivers and haunted roads. My name is Ronnie, and I've been a long-haul trucker for 15 years. What I am about to tell you happened on a run from Los Angeles to Phoenix, a classic highway route I'd driven hundreds of times. It was pitch black, as always, just the high beams cutting through the desert, and I was hauling a refrigerated trailer, the temperature set for frozen cargo. Gross weight, a little over 80,000 pounds. I was 6 hours into the run, deep in the mental fog that comes at the isolation of night driving. I was on autopilot, with just the CB radio humming static. That's when I heard the first sound. It wasn't loud, but it was distinct, coming from the back. THUMP. I turned the radio volume down. I waited. The truck is noisy, the road is noisy. It's easy to mistake sounds, but I know the sound my trailer makes. This was different. A hollow, muffled sound. Thump, thump, like someone was hitting the metal from the inside of the frozen cargo box. I laughed out loud. Okay, Ronnie, sleep deprivation finally got you. It's the suspension. But the knocking wasn't rhythmic with the road. It was 3 knocks, a pause, and then 4 knocks. Not random. I pulled over at the next rest area, an empty patch of asphalt with 2 other trucks, parked far enough away that I was effectively alone. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed down. The air was frigid, and the desert silence was deafening. I inspected the trailer. I looked at the security seal on the rear door intact. I checked the tires, the suspension. Nothing. I was about to climb back in, calling myself an idiot, when I heard it again. TEUMP, thump, thump. Pause. Thump. I froze. The knocking was coming from the center of the box, deep within the frozen cargo. I grabbed my cell phone and called my supervisor, Rick. His voice was thick with sleep. Rick, it's Ronnie. There's something in my box. It shouldn't be possible, but something is knocking in there. The seal is intact. Rick sighed. Ronnie, the load is frozen. There is nothing alive in there. It's a 53-foot metal box. It must be the shifting ice or an error in the weight reading. Just keep driving. I hung up. I couldn't keep driving. The fear had paralyzed me. I started thinking, if it were a stowaway, they would have frozen hours ago. What survives sub-zero temperatures? I was a trucker, not a detective, but this felt deeply wrong. I walked to the front of the trailer, where the refrigeration unit hummed, and started checking the temperature gauge. The reading was normal, but then I looked back at the GPS and telematics panel in the cab. The weight. The cargo telematics were showing the total weight had increased. Not by much, maybe 400 pounds, but it was volatile. It swayed back and forth, even though the truck was stationary, as if something were shifting. In that moment, I wasn't dealing with a simple stowaway anymore. I was dealing with an entity, something that could defy logic and manipulate the telematics of my own trucker rig. I got back into the cab, shaking. That's when the knocking changed. It wasn't a thump anymore. It was a wet, scraping sound against the inner metal, as if something were trying to flay the wall to get out. I started the truck, my heart pounding in my throat. I drove the rest of the night, ignoring the isolation and the fear. I didn't look in the side mirror, and I ignored the telematics panel that was flashing the irregular weight. When I reached the depot, the sun was high. Security inspected the trailer. The seal was intact. They cracked it open. The load was there, untouched. But on the inner walls, there were 3 long, moist streaks, as if an arm covered in mucus had tried to scrape away the insulation. And the weight? It was back to normal. I never drove that highway route again. I know what I heard. And I know that, for a few hours on that desolate long-haul road, I was hauling an entity that was alive, and it did not want to be delivered. Today, I continue working on the road, but I only travel during the day, without the nighttime isolation, to avoid paranormal encounters. The deepest terror lies not in the unknown, but in the violation of your known world. Ronnie learned the isolation of the long-haul road is merely a waiting room. His frozen cargo was supposed to be inert, sealed, safe. Yet, the entity found a way to use the very weight of his machine against him. If your telematics lie, and your cargo shifts, what faith do you have left in the machine that carries you? We continue now, deeper into the dark. This story was told to me by a veteran trucker named Dale, a man who looked like he was carved out of asphalt and silence. His experience centers around the heavy fog of sleep deprivation on the I-40 in New Mexico, deep into a long-haul journey. Dale was on a run of over 48 hours with minimal rest breaks. He knew he was pushing the limit, but the delivery schedule was non-negotiable. The darkness on that stretch of highway is absolute. Only the sound of the engine and the small dash lights proved he wasn't floating in space. This prolonged isolation inside the cab is the road's first trick. The first thing that happened was subtle, something that appeals to the psychological horror that develops with exhaustion. The small red LED light on his instrument cluster, which usually indicated a minor engine fault, began to flicker. It wasn't constant, but in an unusual cadence, like an irregular pulse. Dale pulled over, shut the trucker rig down, waited, and restarted it. The LED went out. He shrugged and drove on. 20 minutes later, the LED was back, blinking faster. He was focusing so intently on that small red dot that he almost didn't register what was happening in his side view, the main rearview mirror on the driver's side. Through the mist rising from the highway, he saw a man. The man was walking on the shoulder of the asphalt, dressed in dark, worn clothes. Dale thought, poor guy, car broke down. But then he glanced at his speedometer. He was doing 70 miles per hour. He blinked. The man was still there. Not just there. The man was keeping pace with the truck. He was running alongside the trailer, moving with impossible speed. Here, the visual shock began to escalate. A dark silhouette seemed to be staring directly into the cab, its face indistinguishable in the darkness. Dale turned the radio off. The silence in the cab was broken only by the engine and Dale's heavy, panicked breathing. He tried to rationalize. This is sleep deprivation. It's a mirage. It's water spray. He forced himself to look straight ahead for 10 seconds, counting. A psychological defense. Then he looked back at the rearview mirror. The man wasn't running anymore. He was stationary. But he was hovering directly next to the cab, his head perfectly level with Dale's window. What Dale saw in that brief, terrifying reflection was a featureless face, smooth and dark as charcoal, and 2 fixed white eyes staring right at him. Dale screamed. Not a cry of surprise, but a primal, pure horror scream. He instinctively wrenched the steering wheel, nearly losing control of the trucker rig. When he finally wrestled the wheel straight, the figure was gone from the rearview mirror. But Dale noticed something chilling. The red fault LED that had been blinking irregularly on his dash was now solidly illuminated. The mechanical failure became physical evidence of the entity. He kept driving until dawn, stopping only at a crowded service station where light and people were abundant. He inspected the side of the truck. The paint was untouched. But on the aluminum casing of the side mirror, there were 5 deep, parallel scratches, as if something with powerful claws had gripped it for a split second. He touched the marks. They were fresh and sharp. Dale could never explain how something could run alongside the trucker rig or what the featureless face was. He only knows that the highway had sent an entity that disregarded the laws of physics, and it had been riding along with him. He learned that on the long-haul road, sometimes the scariest signs appear when you are too exhausted to trust your own eyes. True isolation is doubting your own sanity. The road's oldest and most effective weapon is sleep deprivation. It shreds the boundaries between what is real and what crawls in your blind spot. For a trucker, the rearview mirror is your final defense against the world. When the entity manages to enter that reflection, it manages to enter your mind. And in the absolute isolation of the highway, there is no one to confirm what you saw. We continue now to the next frequency. Sometimes the danger comes from the very place meant to be your connection. Josh ran roads through Texas. He enjoyed the isolation, and the only thing that broke the silence was the CB radio, specifically Channel 19. Most of it was just trucker chatter, weather reports, and occasional warnings about state troopers. One late night, he was passing through a desolate stretch of the highway when the silence of Channel 19 was broken by a voice. It wasn't static. It was unnervingly clear. A child's voice. "Can anyone hear me? Please, I'm lost. I'm waiting." Josh immediately grabbed the mic. "Yeah, I hear you. This is Big J. What's your name, little one? Where are you?" The answer came back with a light hiss, but perfectly intelligible. "I don't know. I just see your red lights. You can come get me, mister." Josh's heart sank. A lost child out here was every trucker's nightmare. "Yes, of course. Stay calm. Tell me what you see. Is there a sign or a building?" There was a long silence, followed by a quiet sob. "I see your trucker rig now. You're driving right past me." Josh glanced around. There was nothing. He slammed on the brakes, checking his rearview mirrors. Nothing. Just the void of the highway. He grabbed the mic again. "Sweetheart, you must be confusing me with another rig. I don't see you. What color is my cab?" The child's voice came back, closer and colder. "It's blue and white. I'm right here." Josh felt a sickening chill. His truck was blue and white. "Where is here?" he asked, his voice tense. "I'm in the ditch. You passed me. I've been waiting for a long time. Please, come back. I'm cold." Josh started shaking. If this was a real child, she would be freezing. But the road was straight. He hadn't seen a car wreck or a body. He slowly began to reverse. He was approaching the point where he thought the voice had first broken the transmission. With every foot he backed up, the voice grew louder and clearer, as if the child was running to catch up. When he reached what should have been the source of the transmission, Channel 19 erupted in a deafening scream of static, mixed with a chilling, sharp sound of a child's laughter. Josh threw the mic to the floor and sped off. He didn't stop until he was over 200 miles away. He never turned his CB radio off, but he never returned to Channel 19. The most terrifying part? The next morning, a fellow long-haul trucker called him. "Hey, Big J, yesterday night, down in Texas, my CB radio started making this horrible noise. It was like a scream, mixed with static. I tried calling you on 19, but it was just blocked. Were you there?" Josh knew the answer. The child's voice wasn't asking for a ride. It was using the CB radio to lure him into the supernatural isolation. And for a few minutes, the entity had used his communication tools to trap him in a conversation he couldn't win on that lonely highway. Communication is supposed to bridge the gap of isolation. But on the long-haul road, the CB radio is nothing more than a channel for the entity to reach out. Josh discovered that when the darkness wants you, it uses your lifeline as a lure. You can cut the wire, but you can't unhear the voice. Our final stop involves a deep violation, the one place a trucker should always be safe: his bed. Tony was a conscientious long-haul trucker who followed Ole's rules. He stopped at busy rest areas, He never left his cab unsecured, and he always checked the perimeter. His cab was his fortress, his small, mobile home, and he kept it religiously safe. He was at a well-lit truck stop in Nebraska. The lot was full, providing the false sense of security that comes from being near other trucker rigs. He ate dinner, called his wife, and climbed into his heavy-duty sleeping bag, which was laid out in the small sleeper berth behind the seats. The bag's zipper was thick, metal, and he always pulled it all the way up, feeling the secure clack of the pull tab resting against the top of the fabric. Tony fell into a deep sleep, the kind of restful coma a long-haul driver truly needs. He was woken not by a loud noise, but by a subtle, unsettling sound, a soft sound of metal scraping. He lay perfectly still, listening. The sound was coming from the side of the cab, near the sleeper window. It was slow and deliberate, like someone was methodically running a small, sharp object across the paint, just below his ear. Tony reached out slowly, grabbed his heavy-duty flashlight, and clicked it on. He illuminated the window. There was nothing, only the reflection of the interior. He thought, just a rat, maybe a piece of debris. He tried to rationalize the isolation and the noise, zipped up his sleeping bag, and went back to sleep. That's when the real psychological horror began. Suddenly, he realized he was very hot, unbearably warm. He tried to adjust the zipper, just a small tug to let some air in. The zipper would not move. He tried pulling it down with more force, feeling the heavy nylon fabric stretch against his chest. The zipper was stuck fast. Panic started to set in. He put both hands on the metal pull tab and looked closely in the dim light. He saw that where the pull tab should have been resting, securely against the fabric, there was a thin strand of black nylon thread, stitched repeatedly and tightly through the zipper teeth, looping across the fabric multiple times. The claustrophobia hit him like a physical blow. Someone had entered his cab while he was sleeping a silent, meticulous intruder and sewn his sleeping bag shut from the outside, leaving him trapped. He screamed, a muffled shout of fear, and violently tore the heavy fabric, using pure adrenaline to rip himself free. He scrambled into the front of the cab, grabbing his biggest wrench. The cab was empty. The doors were locked. He was safe, yet utterly violated. He checked the cab thoroughly, the storage cabinets, the space under the seat. Nothing. He only grasped the true dimension of the horror when he looked outside. On the dusty glass of the sleeper window, there was a single clean circle wiped into the grime, as if someone had pressed their face against the glass and breathed repeatedly to clear a small viewing spot. Tony looked out at the other trucker rigs. No one was awake. No one had seen anything. He called the police. They inspected the damaged sleeping bag and the clean circle on the window, but couldn't find fingerprints or signs of forced entry. The officer finally shrugged. Maybe a vandal, sir. A very quiet one. Tony knew it wasn't a vandal. It was an entity that had the key to his deepest fears. Something that knew where he slept, and that could violate the one safe place on the long-haul highway without leaving a trace. He sold the trucker rig and left the profession. He could never close his eyes in a cab again, knowing that darkness could stitch him in. The worst kind of horror is the violation of trust, little ravens. For a trucker, the sleeper berth is the final retreat from the highway's isolation. Tony found out that the entity doesn't need to break a lock to enter. It only needs to break your sense of security. When something can silently sew you into your own bed and breathe on the window while you sleep, it teaches you a terrifying lesson. You are never truly alone, and you are never truly safe. Not even in your sanctuary. You have faced the live cargo, the Rearview Man, the voice of the CB radio, and the silent threat of the sewn-shut sleeping bag. You have survived another shift. But the lesson remains, little ravens. The isolation of the long-haul road isn't a lack of presence. It is the presence of an entity that waits for you to drop your guard. The highway knows all your defenses, and it will use them to turn your cab into a cage. Never trust the silence. Never trust the darkness. And never, ever trust what you see in the mirror after 48 hours without sleep. Did you enjoy the ride? If you seek more encounters from the darkest stretches of the highway, on the final screen, we have 2 more videos for you to choose from. Subscribe to this channel and like this video to help other lonely souls find their way to the light or the dark. Go ahead.